All right, we are good. All right, so question for this week. We've got frequency of lifts per week in the squat, bench, and deadlift. How do we program it and why? So, for example, squatting on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays, why would we structure it that way if we do? Mike, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. So, of course, as always, it's going to be dependent on the lifter, where they are in their program, right? So just assuming that they're at the beginning of any prep, let's just say, we're way out and we're hitting it for a higher volume, a couple things come into play. One, we need to see what are the most fatiguing lifts. Deadlift is probably going to have the least amount of frequency. The squat next, and for a lot of people, or most people, I would say, the bench you could hit pretty frequently. If not sometimes 4 to 5 days a week. Weight class definitely comes into play, as bigger dudes are going to recover a lot faster than the smaller guys. So they could probably have, like 2 deadlift days. I would say we got some littler guys who get 2 deadlift days, but, generally speaking, you could have a little bit more frequency within all lifts with them. And again, just how are we changing what the actual competition lift is? So you had a good post the other day about you might have a competition lift, a high bar, or say low bar is a competition, a high bar, and then some other variation, maybe a front squat, right? I think that generally outlines it. Is there anything I'm missing on
that? I'd say a lot of my lifters will squat between 2 and 3 times a week. And like you said, it depends on the person and how much volume they can handle. I know if we're making progress on twice a week, I'm really not going to push it to 3 times a week until we need to. And when I do, especially if I'm doing 3 times a week, I'll have that middle day. If I go Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that middle day will be your fatigue management day, where volume is a little bit lower than it was on the first day. And your relative intensity is not quite as high, just so you're still getting technique practice and you're still working on the lift or some component of the lift if it's a variant, but you're getting volume in, whereas you would normally be resting kind of thing. So you're kind of squeezing in a little bit more. You're keeping technique high. Like you said with deadlifts, I typically have at least once, usually twice a week. And then the farther out we are from a meet, I'll go 1 competition lift day and then 1 a technique-based day. So either we're hitting competition lifts for singles or doubles at 75-80%, or we're doing pause deadlifts or some kind of technique-oriented training session. Matt, what about you?
Cool. Kind of missed half of what you said. Kind of froze up a little bit there during it. So if I happen to answer that, I apologize in advance. But when it comes down to frequency, and all themselves, I actually find typically that smaller people can recover faster than bigger people. Smaller people usually aren't lifting as much weight. They don't have as much tissue as the larger individual, so the recovery time is shorter for the amount of tissue they have to.
And you're breaking up.
Fully recover, just nervous system, because they're not lifting out. You'll find typically that girls can lift a lot, and being in smaller, middle body weight class. I think a big part of it too comes down to just mastery of movement, but also fatigue management. I want to try to have you do the competition lift as much as possible, just to try to take that technique and just get a lot of practice with the movement. But a lot of times it's hard to recover from a low bar back squat or a competition style deadlift. So you kind of have to find variations that will help you get to hypertrophy or strength gaining or something like that, and just try not to stray too far away from the competition movement. I know for a lot of my guys right now, say the guys who just got out of nationals, I'll have them be doing say if they're squatting Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll have them be doing like a high bar or higher fatigue, and they come in on Wednesday. They do like a lower volume, like Evan said, protocol for competition squats, get some practice in, and then usually the Friday following they'll come in and do again just with more volume, more reps, whatever, to try to keep the mastery of movement high, get a lot of work in, and just like I said, keep practicing. Obviously, when it comes down to where you are, like how far out of a meet, depends on what you'll be doing. Obviously, if you're closer, you're going to be doing more. But as we're pretty far away, I try to manage the fatigue as much as possible. I want everybody going to every session like as fresh as they can be. So there's really like a million different variables that go into your frequency of lifting. I know I use the squat as a big example here, but like Mike said before, like the bench, you can train a lot more. I know specifically for myself, when I'm close to a meet, it's like 5 days a week benching, 3 times a week squatting, and then usually twice a week deadlifting. That's usually just kind of where I can recover from. Obviously, the volume plays a role, but there's just so many variables that it's really hard to just give one size fits all for everybody. So it's a lot of just trial and error.
I agree. I think something with bench too is the example I gave earlier, having that one middle fatigue management day. It's kind of starts to get stretched out when you're doing a lift 3, 4, 5 times a week. I know, especially on bench, I'll waive it kind of. So my first day would be a higher fatigue day, then I'd have a moderate fatigue kind of management day, and then maybe we'd go a little bit heavier and then drop back down, manage fatigue a little bit, and then if we had a 5th day, same thing, we'd probably peak up a little bit and then have an off day. And you, like, use your, especially when you're planning out like the days that you're training, use your off days strategically. So I'll typically put a high fatigue day right before a day where we won't do that lift, just so you can kind of get some recovery on there. And then if you're still not recovering, you can kind of manage percentages and how close to failure you go on the day after. Like Matt said, there's really a million different ways you can do it. Mike?
How do you guys, let's go like sumo versus conventional. Because you have so much more lower back in play. You stick with that 2 times?
For me, I guess I'll jump this off, but most of the time, some people, like in the off season or when they're further out, I'll do like 1 day conventional, 1 day sumo, just because, like you said, conventional beats back up, but then a lot of times sumo will just kind of beat hips up. So just try to micromanage the amount of fatigue we feel in our joints as best as possible, but like closer to a meet. And if it's somebody who doesn't really get beat up that much, or somebody that has just like lower back issues and doesn't really like conventional deadlifting, I'll keep sumo usually twice a week. Me personally, I have had a period of time a long time ago when I was really like not that strong. I think I was pulling like 400, like really low 400s. There was a point where I was deadlifting 3 times a week, and I was actually doing well on it. But then there's been a point where I was only deadlifting once a week because I was just getting beat up. So
yeah, like to add to that, I know I definitely program differently for even between 2 guys who pull sumo. If one of them is just structurally built to pull sumo, so long arms, you can get close to the bar, longer legs. I've had really good success with guys pulling 3 times a week. And then also on the other hand, I've got guys who are just absolutely not built to deadlift whatsoever. Really short arms, great for benching, but their range of motion is just so much longer than somebody else who is more mechanically efficient, so they can't really handle as much volume. So like, especially if it's sumo, I find people, regardless of how they're built for it, can typically handle it a little bit more because, like you said, there's not as much lower back contributing to it. Whereas conventional, we're doing some moderate volume on day 1, and if we have a day 2, it's more like light technique stuff because they're just going to get trashed, especially if they're squatting multiple times a week too.
How often?
You go ahead, Matt.
Sorry. How much do you feel like how hard do you ever try to push the conventional in training? Like, do you kind of just feel like, oh, if they're low bar back squatting, like that's going to carry over a lot to their deadlift, as long as their technique is sound and they're practicing and they're making sure they're in like good positions and stuff like that.
Like it really kind of depends on how they're like. If their low bar is pretty upright and erect, and it's not a ton on their low back, we'll push conventional a little harder. It really comes down to like knowing your athlete and just if they're feeling trashed after doing 3 sets of 6 and then some low bar squats a couple times a week, you might need to dial back on either end of that. But usually I find most people can handle about 24 to 36 reps of conventional in one training day, and then you kind of micromanage the second day if you have one. And maybe, like you said, maybe even throw in a sumo day just to try and get some stress off their back. Even though I find sumo doesn't really transfer to conventional as much as conventional transfers to sumo.
Sure. Also, I think we have to look at squat stance and how that plays into their deadlift stances too. You know, a sumo guy who also squats really wide, you have to manage those two against each other a little different than a guy who squats wide and pulls conventional.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have very many people who squat super wide. I know, like, for those that do, it kind of wrecks your hips a little bit. So, like, yes, doing a bunch of sumo volume the day after you've squatted a bunch of really wide, heavy volume probably isn't the best idea. You're kind of I think something like that is where you really need to have focused like accessory stuff just for injury prevention purposes. Just because like if you're maybe just because I can't squat that wide, but to me I feel like it just trashes your hips. If you're built to squat that way, great. But if you're trying to force yourself because Louis said so, and
who's Louis?
Right.
Louis. Oh my man. Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like most people really don't squat like super wide, especially, or maybe just in like, within, I don't really want to say just within the USAPL, but like that's most of the people who us three work with. And like you said, you don't have many guys that squat wide. I really don't think I have any guys that squat that wide. Like you said, they just wreck the hips. You can definitely handle a lot more training on the squat. If, foot stance is a little more narrow, just because there's not as much, I guess torque going on in the joints or anything like that. But
maybe breaking up.
Yeah, froze up pretty hard on me on that
one.
What the frick?
It was just like the last couple words. I get what you're saying though. Something else I wanted to add.
All I said.
No, something else I wanted to add to that too is obviously like movement efficiency is something I kind of push for a lot of my guys. Like on squats, for example, like we're striving for that identical bar path, nice and vertical, like every time, not a lot of deviation because you're wasting energy, you're not moving efficiently, kind of thing. And I find that the guys who are the most efficient at it can tend to handle the most volume in training. I don't know if that's directly related, but I mean I can kind of stretch and make that connection.
You definitely have to assume that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, like, I don't think there's any data supporting it, but my own anecdotal stuff from the past few years, that's kind of what I'm looking at.
Hey, what about how we actually go into their programming day to day? I think for most of us, we'll put squat before deads. Do you guys ever do, and I'm talking about competition, I know some people will hit the front squat after deads or whatever other movement. Are there any times where you guys put deadlift first before squat?
I don't, just from like an injury prevention standpoint. Deadlifts are going to trash your back, like we were saying. They make you just more systematically fatigued. And if you throw a bar on your back afterwards, like you could always just let go of a deadlift and drop it. Whereas with a squat, if you're going to bail, you're either going forward or you're going to have to dump it back on you. And I mean, I guess you can, but I prefer not to.
I don't see the point of it either, really, in terms of when we're looking at a competition. You're going to deadlift fatigued from squat and bench anyway. You might as well just practice that in training too.
Yep, I agree. There will be times where I'll have people bench before they squat if they really want to, or deadlift before they bench. I don't feel like that makes a ton of difference. And then as we get closer to a meet, I'll have them do it more in a competition order. But I'll never squat after a deadlift.
Yeah, for me, I definitely agree. Sometimes I usually try to keep things in like competition order, especially if they're going to do like a 3-time or squat, bench, deadlift in one day. Occasionally, only like for very rarely. I'll have some of my guys who I feel, say if they need to really work on their bench, I'll have days where I want them specifically to do their bench after they squat, or usually just after they squat, just to try to get like the keep the competition practice in mind, just because of the fatigue from the squatting. But sometimes if there's someone who really needs to work on bench, I'll have them have a day where they will do their benching before they're squatting. Normally I'd put benching before deadlifting. I tend to feel, if I ever do it, I tend to feel trashed if I bench after deadlifting. But other than that, I try to keep everything in just the competition order, just to try to keep it as specific as possible. But other than that, no, I would never really program a squat after a deadlift. Maybe, like you said, like a front squat or a split squat or something like that. But other than that, I don't think the risk versus the reward is really worth it.
I feel that.
Gotcha.
What else we got, boys?
How do you so programming your percentages of a 1RM throughout the week. For me, I know, like I said, this kind of goes, it depends on where you're at in your training cycle. Obviously, we're going to be going a little heavier right before a meet, and then I'll kind of wave them too. So mine's a very typical quote-unquote DUP, where I'll go, say, 70, 75, 80, or usually there's some variance in there too. So I have done some like interesting loading strategies where I'll go like 70, 80 singles in the middle of the week, and then 80% for 4s or 5s at the end of the week, kind of thing. And I'll do that for people who kind of like get in their own heads, like the people who are really mental lifters, where if they see a number on paper, they get all freaked out and they get like they'll kind of freeze up when it comes time to actually do the lift. So I found that, especially when I get over 85% and where people are starting to touch heavy stuff, I'll have them do, like, say, a single or a double in the middle of the week, and we'll use that as their like fatigue management day, but they're also getting exposure to the weight, so they know what it feels like on their back, and then we'll come in at the end of the week and say we'll hit that same weight for 4s or 5s, and that way they're a little less anxious going in, that it's not to the point where they're just going to miss a lift because everything they've done leading up to it that week has been lighter. I don't know if you guys do anything like that.
Really quick for that, the Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you're trying to get them to just move it as fast as possible, just to be as confident as possible with it. So that.
Yep. So
am I right?
I'll give you an example. So like, let's say we were doing 80% on let's say we're like a month or two out from a meet. We're doing 80% for 5s on Monday. So we'll do 4x5 at 80. On Wednesday, we'll go, say, singles at 85. Just a handful of them, kind of manage some of that fatigue from Monday, because that is kind of heavy volume. And then Friday or Saturday, we'd come in, hit 3 sets of 4 or 4 sets of 3 at 85. That way we've already had exposure to it for singles on Wednesday. That day 3 of squats, we kind of know what it feels like, and we're just hitting it for more reps. It's still going to be hard, but it's not going to be as mentally exhausting as going right from an 80% day to an 85% day.
Yeah, I dig that. How many days? Is that usually a Monday, Wednesday, Friday?
I do a lot of Monday, Wednesday, Saturday for squats.
I was going to say, yeah, going off just like super compensation, that's perfect right there.
Yeah.
That's sick.
For me, depending on like where we at, say, going back to like the DUP kind of style that people kind of just tend to, link when they hear, the word DUP, or the letters DUP, I should say. But anyway, if you're gonna have like, say, 3 percentages, I'll usually have, for me, deviates a little bit differently from what Evan said. Say if we're just gonna have, 70, 75, and 80, I'll actually usually put the 7, say for like a hypertrophy or, off season, whatever. I'll usually put like 75 on Monday, and then 70 on Wednesday, and then the 80% on Friday, just to really want that day to like not feel tough or like mentally exhausting. I want them to be able to come in and feel confident and just like smash on the weight, make their technique, like look perfect. What Evan was talking about before with putting the 80% singles before the 80%, for multiple reps on the Wednesday, I actually really like that. What if you guys don't want to dive any further into this topic? I actually have a question for Evan.
Yeah, what's up?
How do you go about progressing? Do you do your programming week to week, or do you send everybody a block at once, or
I go block at a time.
so you'll send them like 4 weeks at a time?
Yeah, somewhere between 4 and 6.
Okay, and how do you make the progressions week to week on that? Do you raise percentage? Do you try to? I mean, obviously, it depends where you are. Let's just say you're 8 weeks out from a meet. Do you raise percentage each week? Do you just try to increase the volume a little bit each week, and then you're going to taper it down, around the 4 to 2 week out mark, or how do you go about making the progressions?
It depends on. So for every block of training, I kind of set like a small goal. So
Okay.
and then like so let's say it's a 4 week block. If they're coming fresh out of a meet, I'll throw them like an accumulation block just to kind of reestablish that feeling of, hey, we're back into some volume. We'll slowly pick it up. So maybe we'll do 3 sets of 8 on day 1 for squats Monday. Week 1, 2, 3, and 4. Volume won't change, but we'll just creep percentage up. Maybe we'll start at like 3 sets of 8 at 65, and we'll go 70, 72, and then maybe in week 4 we'll hit 75%, where it's moderately challenging for them. And it's just to kind of reestablish some comfortability or being comfortable under volume again. Or if I'm doing a block where I'm really trying to focus on pushing volume, I'll try and make and like they've had a couple blocks before this. We'll say set a goal for week 4 that's technically impossible in week 1, but you've also kind of got to set yourself up for it. So like if we're doing, I don't know, like something that's higher intensity, something I like to use a lot is like 4 sets of 5 or a 5x5 at 82 to 85%, because technically at the beginning of a training cycle that shouldn't really be possible, because that's a really challenging set and rep scheme, especially at that high of a percentage. So like if they can hit that, we kind of know they've made progress. So sometimes I'll do, I don't know, like it really depends on what I'm going after. Like I've done weeks, like I'm trialing something on somebody right now. So she's really built to squat. She's got really short femurs, a very efficient bar path. We're consistently adding a set every single week, to the point where in week 4 we're testing. We're doing a 4x5 at 85. And right now she's on track to smash it. So that means everything kind of worked out well. But if people can't handle volume like that, I won't do it. But my very general scheme is I'll add volume from week 1 to week 2. I'll add intensity from week. Let's say I go 3 sets of 8 at 65. I'll go 4 sets of 8 at 65, 4 sets of 8 at 70. And then week 4, we can either kind of pull back on volume, go back to 3 sets, and just kind of like fatigue manage a little bit, or deload, if you want to call it that. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many different ways of doing it. I'm not sure how you guys typically go.
Okay, and also when it comes to, say your lifters in, a couple, let's just say anywhere from 8 weeks out to like 2 weeks out or 1 week out from a meet. I'm sure you program in singles for them to, perform in training, right?
Yeah, so something I like to do is starting about a month, like 6 to 8 weeks out, I'll start giving them top sets to an RPE. So let's say 8 weeks out, we're hitting a triple at a 7. The week after that, we'll hit a triple at an 8, and then we'll slowly work our way to like doubles at an 8, singles at an 8, singles at an 8.5, and then about a week and a half, week out, depending on the person, we'll hit a single at a 9, and all of those are followed by back off work, mostly to a similar RPE, but higher rep stuff. So if we're doing a triple to an 8, 6 weeks out, we'll follow that up with say 4 sets of 3 or 3 sets of 3 to like a 7, and then we'll slowly build up to the point where if we're 2 or 3 weeks out, we're hitting a handful of singles afterwards, just because we're trying to like get more specific. We're really ingraining singles pattern, getting them ready for the meet kind of thing. And then I don't know, like my usual like week before the meet, we'll hit a single to a 9 or 2 or 3 singles to a 9 depending on the person, and then follow that up with some like singles to an 8 or something. Or if you want to use percentages, we'll go singles at 90% or 87%, somewhere around there.
All right. I was just curious if you programmed in numbers for singles, or if you kind of just let them use the RPE scale or not. I was just curious about that.
I used to give them like solid numbers, and I found that if I let them auto-regulate, if they're good at auto-regulating, if I let them do it, we kind of gauge progress a little bit better. So like if I gave them 90% of their training cycle max, that might actually be 85 or 87. Whereas if I let them push themselves to a 9, we kind of get a better gauge for where our attempt selection is going to be.
Cool. That's a good, good example you got there. Definitely did that. I just wanted to see if you programmed those in or not, because that's not usually something that I do. Actually, using percentages is something that's a little bit new to me. I know you and I talked about that before, but so I was just curious to hear your input on that.
How are you
We got any other
choosing what number to base the percent off of? Are you always going with a meet PR, or do you ever go and
like the first couple blocks of a training cycle, I'll typically stick off of their meet PR, because that's usually where the numbers are coming from, or a mock meet or something. And then if it's a long training cycle, like if we're carrying on, we've got 6, 7, 8 months between meets, we'll do some kind of volume test in the middle and just re-establish numbers. So either a plus set, or hitting a triple to an 8, or a 3 RM or a 5 RM, some kind of way that I can get some way I can reestablish a new training number, because at some point you're going to notice that like their numbers are consistently easy. And that's another reason why I'll give percentages with an RPE, because like even if things are starting to get easy, they can kind of finish out that block and still adjust to where I want them to be at.
Word. I dig that.
Yeah, definitely too. We have any other questions?
No, this one's getting long. We should wrap this one up for this week, though.
Yeah, I'm going to you guys anyway, so.
Yeah, make a little less than an hour this week. Yeah.
You're gonna eat your deodorant there, Matt?
I already did.
Stop the stream now.